Hi, everyone. Wow, there's a lot of reverb on that. My name is Adam Bernstein. I'm the executive director of the New Group. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to New Group Now, a panel discussion on confronting racial bias and Seth V. Rosenfeld's downtown race riot. Before we begin, I just want to give a thank you to the National Black Theater for hosting this evening in this beautiful space. Yeah. We're also streaming online tonight through BeTerrific, so a special welcome to all of you online tuning in as well. And also a special thanks to the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation's Building Demand for the Arts program for supporting tonight's event. For those of you that might not be familiar with the New Group, we're a nonprofit off-Broadway theater. We've been producing and presenting here in the city for, this is our 23rd season. And the New Group's mission is to develop and produce contemporary plays. And we often seek material that is now. And by that, we mean plays that explore issues, themes, topics that are socially and culturally relevant, and Downtown Race Riot is no exception. We produce 4 shows a year. Our shows are presented out of the Signature Center on 42nd Street. So Downtown Race Riot is a new play. It is inspired from an actual event that took place, an actual race riot that occurred in 1976 in Washington Square Park. In the play, it's the events in the hours leading up to the actual race riot, and it really centers around this from the village, Peanut, and his best friend, a Haitian kid, Massive, and their choice to join the riot. And I think as the playwright describes it, it's also about the cost of being part of a tribe. And I think it's our hope that through this discussion tonight, we're able to really use the play as a springboard for this important discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for tonight. Nancy Giles is an award-winning actress and commentator. She's probably best known for her TV appearances in China Beach, as well as her contributions to CBS Sunday Morning. Also, as an actor, her one-woman shows, including Notes of a Negro Neurotic and black comedy, The Wacky Side of Racism. And Nancy actually last worked with the New Group in 2012 for a special benefit reading that we hosted of Women Behind Bars with Cynthia Nixon and Rosie O'Donnell. So please give a warm welcome to Nancy Giles.
That wasn't very graceful, but first, thank you all for being here tonight on kind of a funky day, let's put it that way. So I'm glad that you all still came out to hear this conversation with these wonderful panelists. You've got a program that lists their incredible accomplishments. I'm just going to skim over some of those as I introduce everyone. To my right, Anu Gupta is the founder and CEO of Be More, which is a social enterprise that employs proven in-person and online training programs to eradicate bias in key industries, to save lives. I love that you say that. To save lives, improve top-line performance, and reduce billions of dollars of wasted costs. How's that? Anu recently gave a TED Talk on breaking bias, and his work has been profiled in the Huffington Post, NPR, and the New York Post. Next, we have, yes, give it up, that's right. Next, Moise Moranci is an activist and actor. He's 22 years old. He's an American actor, director, hip-hop recording artist, poet, writer, and activist from Brooklyn. Holla! I'm from Queens, but I can still holla. He's best known for his acting roles and his hardcore, thought-provoking, uncensored rap music. And Moise is currently appearing in the aforementioned off-Broadway play, the new group's Downtown Race Riot, and you can follow him on social media at Moise Moranci. And I also have to say, because I'm going to talk about this, he is also a hero to a specific young girl riding on a Queens bus who he intervened and helped thwart someone who was sexually harassing her. So that's really some cool beans, man. Good on you.
Thank you.
Next up, Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis is the first African American and first woman to serve as senior minister in the Collegiate Church of New York, which was founded in 1628. Wow. She hosted Just Faith, an on-demand program on MSNBC.com. She's a frequent media commentator and an author of books for adults and for kids. Some of my favorites: The Pentecost Paradigm, 10 Strategies for Becoming a Multiracial Congregation. That'll be good. That's that right there, right? You know, because there's not enough of that. And her upcoming children's book, You Are So Wonderful. Wait, is that upcoming or is that out now already?
That's out now.
That's out. You Are So Wonderful. I love the title. And she's currently at work on a book about a path to revolutionary love. That's beautiful, Dr. Jackie. All right. And finally, Dr. James Braxton Peterson, who's the Director of Africana Studies and Professor of English at Lehigh University. Both Professor Peterson and I were inspired by Dr. Bill Scott, who was the head of the Black Studies Department at Oberlin College when I went there and was a mentor of mine and his. I just wanted to shout out to him. Let's see. James is the author of several books, two that I particularly dig. This sounds weird that I say I dig them, but I think they're important. Prison Industrial Complex for Beginners, and Hip Hop Headphones, a scholar's critical playlist. I got to get on that because I need a lot of help with that. He's a media commentator. He's appeared on MSNBC, Al Jazeera, CNN, HLN, Fox News, believe it or not, and other networks as an expert on race, politics, and popular culture. So give it up for him and for our entire panel. You know, I realize I shouldn't say Fox News, believe it or not, because we need more conversations like that, you know? And speaking of which, so tonight's conversation is confronting racial bias in our community. So I guess, why don't I let each of you speak a little bit about what that means to you, and then, you know, we can get the conversation started. I mean, one thing that I'm wondering is, in the community where we are located right now, have they had many of these conversations already? Would this conversation be a better conversation in a different community, perhaps? Are there people who need to be talking about this that maybe aren't? But Anu, I'll start with you.
Sure. Can you all hear me? Or
take that.
Perfect. I'll take this. Well, it's again such a privilege and honor to be here. I mean, this is such a historic place, so I feel very grateful to be in your presence today. So I guess the question really is around, what is racial bias today, and how is it important to me? So I'll just start there. Well, as you can see, I'm not African American, and I'm the only non-African American on this panel. But I am an immigrant. I was born in India. I moved here when I was 10 years old. And ever since I moved here, I mean, I love the city. I love America. Yet that has been oftentimes questioned of me because of the way I look. And for me, as someone who loved sciences from a very young age, and also loved history, American history, global history, I've kind of been on this lifelong journey to really understand what are the root causes of bias. What is it? Are we born with this thing called bias, or is it something that we've learned? And as someone who went to grad school, I went to law school, that was kind of the thing that I was really thinking about in the back of my head. And why was it so important to me? Well, of course, because I had the personal experiences of being called Osama bin Laden on a train right after 9/11 many, many, many times. And every time I was like, but I'm not Muslim. I'm not from the Arab world, as if that's okay, right? So, but my first defense was, but you're confusing me for someone I'm not. And that's what bias is to me. Bias is basically when we see people, we're not there in the presence of those people, but in our heads about what those people are supposed to represent. And that's what the science teaches us. Basically, bias is a learned habit It's an algorithm of the mind. It's how we've been programmed to see one another based purely on what we may know about them or how they appear to us. And this is what the neuroscience says. You know, neurons that fire together, wire together. Right? So think about how our neurons have been wired when we see black faces in our country, particularly dark-skinned faces with African features. Think of all the media we watched as a child, as an adult, news media, entertainment media. What are the stories we hear on a daily basis? How many of them are positive? Do we have counter-stereotypic examples? And that's, again, the priming of the brain, which then instills a sense of fear. And based on, again, the social psychology research, 75% of Americans have an automatic white preference, which basically means when you take an unconscious bias test, it's easier for them to associate positive words with white faces and negative words with black faces. But not only is it's not just white Americans, it's all Americans, including 55% African Americans. So I'm just going to leave it there, but of course, this is something I want others to comment on as well.
Sure. Well, thank gosh. I mean, and as Rodgers and Hammerstein said in the song in South Pacific, you've got to be carefully taught. So there's a hard wiring, but there's also like learned behavior. Yikes. Moise, what about you? What do you think about confronting racial bias in our communities or anything that you just heard?
Right. How you guys doing? Y'all good? I'll try that again because it was mad dead in here. Y'all good? Everybody good? All right. Woo! All right. No, no, but there's so many things to unpack. You know, there's definitely a lot of great points that he said regarding how we view what is positive and what is negative. But unfortunately, the unfortunate reality is that black people have been taught to feel inferior. And something that also jumps out at me is that we oftentimes, whenever we talk about race, we've been having discussion over the last 400 years. And we need to have actions, you know. The unfortunate reality is that when I look at the word bias, it said that someone who is against a particular group. And when we add racial bias onto that, who are the people, and it's going to get crazy now, but who are the people who are mostly racially biased in this country? It's not black people. We're not in a position of power in this country. Unfortunately, it's the racist white people who have power, who put us in a predicament that we are in today. And what we need to do is build our own. We need to strengthen our own and love our own in order to do so, and in order to strengthen our own community so we can be in the position that we want. Whenever we see black kids in the community, pull that kid to the side and say, how you doing? You know, ask what's going on, because an unfortunate reality is that when it comes to black children, they're dealing with a whole bunch of things that we don't even know about. Some of these kids have post-traumatic stress disorder, or post-traumatic slave disorder, or police, thugs, sex, drugs, and PTSD. So what we need to do is we need to strengthen our own and have these conversations, but also have actions. We need to have therapy centers in the hood and stuff like that, not just have these intellectual conversations and then white folks go back to having this privilege while we go back to the hood and still deal with the problem when we're not coming together.
You bring up a really good point, because I too have been hearing that phrase, we need to have a conversation. I mean, whether it's about race or about sexual harassment or whatnot, in a weird way, like the talking about having the conversation almost deal with it in active ways. So that's a really great point you brought up. Reverend Dr. Jackie.
I'm gonna touch your mic.
I mean, you know, Moise just talked about PTSD. Your own life, you experienced that at a very young age.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I will. Thank you. I mean, I think the way we respond to racial bias, the way we respond to each other's bodies is very personal. It's personal and then it's political. And so for me, the personal was being a 5-year-old kid in an Air Force base in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where my dad was stationed. And there was my family and a little biracial type girl. But Mom and Dad were black people from Mississippi. So Jim Crow, Mississippi. Meridian, my dad, Ruleville, my mom. And they both went north in the Great Migration to try to escape, you know, poverty in Mississippi. They went to Omaha, Nebraska. They had sex. They got pregnant, they got married. I was a preconceived notion. I just thought I'd get that on the table. But at 5 years old in my kindergarten class, making butter with Mrs. Easley and having a happy, well-adjusted little life until Lisa comes from Mississippi and sits between me and the two white Tommies to say, yeah, that nasty N-word. Plus she gets chocolate milk from her mother's breasts. Now, I don't know which felt yuckier, but to be called a nigger and then to have the chocolate milk coming from the breast as a kid, I was like, okay, all righty then. So then I went home and my mom had the talk that parents have with their kids. She said, though, Jack, this is so stupid, you won't believe this. You won't believe how stupid this is. Some people won't like you just because you're a Negro. I was a Negro then. But we love you, and you're our kid, and you're Lewis, and you can do anything, be anything. Anything you want, if you just work hard. So that talk, it was traumatizing. I went to sleep that night praying, God, no matter what, let it be that no matter what people look like, they'll be loved. And I think that was the beginning of my call to ministry. Adding to that a sense of the kind of trauma I felt when Dr. King was killed. Almost 9 years old in Chicago, and he's murdered. I'm on a field trip with my friends, and he's murdered, and our teacher's a mess. And then Chicago's a mess because all the big cities, let's talk sometime about why we burn up our stuff when we're mad. I'll come back to that. But anyway, everything was on fire, and the bullets were flying. My sister and I were hiding under our bed. And I was really clear then that I was going to pick up Dr. King's mantle. Now, I'm kind of a Malcolm X kind of girl, too, just to be honest. I'm a by any means necessary kind of girl. Not violence, but none of this just talking. But these things really radicalized me. And I, in my corporate career, did stuff with multiracial programs, to get folks working together and we shall overcoming together. But my church downtown is a multi-everything church. Black, white, Asian, Latino, queer, straight, everybody's in there, old, young, and I believe in that. I believe that one way we're going to deal with racial prejudice and white supremacy is that we have to actually be together. We have to disrupt some of the stuff. Yes, I think we need black folks to do black folks. But I also think we need some pockets of resistance where blacks and whites and Latinos and Asians are finding the thing we have in common and working on that together, where we do political stuff together, where we do economic justice together. And I'm going to come back and say more about that, but learn together, protest together, do die-ins together. I take my white people to DC to die in. My white people love talking about race. So there's something about that that's important to me, creating a pocket of resistance in a racist nation where all of us can work together. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have that much to add to what's been laid out here. I would go back to the original question, though, and just say that these conversations do need to take place in places like where Downtown Race Riot is playing, right? Like in Broadway and off Broadway.
Right, exactly.
Because, there's this idea that because of where we are, maybe we're preaching to the choir, but all good choirs need rehearsal. Right, and so we still need to have the conversations here and think through some things. Like a lot of concepts have been laid out here that's worth us parsing a little bit, right? Because bias is one piece, and by the way, we all have bias, and I agree with that everyone should just take the implicit or unconscious bias tests that are available online, just so you can see your own blind spots. I think that's useful and that's important. But some of the other things we're talking about have to do with systemic racism, right? And that's when bias rises to the level of institutional forces. That's when the sort of outcomes for people of color or for women or for poor folks are determined by those biases. So there's a way in which bias can be enacted that ends up being sort of what we think of when we think about institutional racism, or when we think about the sort of consequences of white supremacy. I have had to live my whole life in confrontation with white supremacist biases against who I am and what I look like. But I tend to now, as a professor and as a scholar and somebody who's writing and thinking about these things, to deal less with my own interpersonal experience with it and think more about the systems that are at work. So the reason why I wrote the book Prison Industrial Complex for Beginners is because there are all these great scholars who did all this extraordinary work around mass incarceration, Michelle Alexander being one of them, amongst many, who published great things. But I do a lot of volunteer work in prisons and in public schools, And I'm no disrespect, but they're not going to read the new Jim Crow.
Right.
And so I wanted to produce something that was going to be accessible for younger readers or for folks who are actually incarcerated, so they can understand the systemic forces that are at play when you end up with mandatory minimums, or when you end up, with these sort of aggressive policing tactics that the consequences of which result in the warehousing of human bodies. So I think there's, and I want to say one more thing, and I'll be quiet.
No, don't be quiet.
I think it's important for us, even those of us who think we're always engaged in the conversation, to continue to have it, because your blind spots change. And there are a lot of liberals and progressives who have a lot of blind spots around race. There are a lot of black folks who have a lot of blind spots around the LGBT community. There are a lot of middle class and wealthy folks who have a lot of blind spots around poor folks. And so it's okay for us to have the conversation. And I also just want to push back a little bit about conversation as not being part of action. Because I'm about the action, you know what I mean? I'm about it being in the community, addressing these issues publicly, on TV, in the hood, wherever, that those things are absolutely important. But to be honest with you, some of the most important work I do is going into certain spaces and talking to people. If you go volunteer in a prison, yeah, it's important for us to address policy reform around mass incarceration. But as an individual, one of the best things you can do is go there and talk to people. Go there and build with them. These are human beings who, under a lot of circumstances, not all, but under a lot of circumstances, are in there for nonviolent crimes. A lot of folks are in there for substance abuse. We have basically criminalized addiction. And some of those folks, any kind of human contact is inspiring. And so there, and that's just going in and talking to people. Right? So I think that the intellectual project, a lot, especially in this era, intellectualism gets demonized a lot, and the process of conversating and connecting with people sometimes gets dismissed because people want to act, and also because there are people who control this country right now who are anti-intellectual. But in that kind of environment, it is extremely important for us to embrace, facts and information, and to think critically about the world that we're living in, about the world that our young people are inheriting right now. And so some of that stuff, to me, is really, really important. But it's important for us to have the conversation here, just as it's important for us to have it down at Pershing Theater. By the way, if y'all haven't seen the play, you gotta see it.
You gotta go see this play.
I hear this play is great.
You gotta go see the play. I mean, this guy right here is a star in the play. The most compelling character in the play.
It's amazing.
And so it's definitely worth seeing, and hopefully will generate more conversations. But I really wish the audience that was at the matinee that I went to on Saturday was here right now. Just because the play generates a lot of questions, which I'm sure you're gonna get to.
Well, first I just want to ask a little technical question. Can I be heard? Do I need this, or am I cool with this? I'm cool. Okay, I'll give that to you. That's going to be your mic.
Okay.
Okay. Moise, actually, speaking about the play, made me wonder, because I read a few reviews of the play, and I haven't seen it yet, but I didn't appreciate some of the reviews that I read, and it took me to a bigger question of who the people are that do the reviewing, and who the people are that are the gatekeepers to a lot of really important art and culture and music and theater, and how that can influence conversation, can influence art. I haven't seen your play yet, but the same reviewer for the New York Times that reviewed your play, Ben Brantley, I don't mind naming him, he trashed an incredible show that I thought was not only progressive and brilliant, but had a lot to say, called The Scottsboro Boys. A show, I might add, thank you, a show that by its subject matter alone, there were protesters and pickets by people of color who never saw it, who wanted to shut it down before it even started, because it was a musical, but they were like, this should not be done. They used minstrel in the show. They did it brilliantly. And his review trashed it and didn't help it go to the next level. And I read the review of your play, and I think about the demographics of a lot of reviewers and how that influences things. I'm just wondering
First of all, thank you for that question. I think that's a great question. And the best thing I can say, y'all know Denzel Washington? I like that guy. But I saw an interview with him, and they asked him a question. Somebody asked him, what can you take away from seeing Fences when the movie came out? And he said, whatever you bring to it, right? So as black folks, we come into a play and we see this character who's kind of flawed, who kind of has some anti-blackness in him, that may intrigue us. And then this is a thing that may intrigue us and have us have some questions that we've never asked before. But I don't know who this Brent guy is. What's his name?
Ben Brandon.
Ben Brandon, whatever his name is.
It's fine.
But,
it's fine,
it's whatever you bring to it. And if that's not something that is appealing to him, so why would it necessarily grab him? I spoke to many different people, especially people of color, and it opened a whole different world for them. So it's whatever you bring to it. He probably doesn't have a connection to my character or what it's about. It's called the Downtown Race Riot, and that probably doesn't interest him. And I find something quite ironic is that the play centers, I don't want to ruin the play for you, but there is some interracial stuff going on in the play. And when we look at the Scottsboro Boys, that had the same kind of, if we know the story of the Scottsboro Boys, that had the same kind of theme. So maybe he has something against that, but when it comes to him, he just hating. That's the best thing I can say.
Well, and the thing is, he's in a very powerful position, and he's in a position that's mostly male, I think, and mostly white.
Right.
And is looking at things through a very limited prism. James?
Absolutely.
The play is complex no matter who will be trying to write a review of it. And I think what's most complicated about Moise's character, who is Massive, is that, it's hard for folks to understand how black people internalize white supremacy. So even if you're a white person who kind of understands how racism works, it's very difficult for a white person to understand how black people internalize it. Another layer of complication, he plays a Haitian immigrant. And so it's difficult for white folks to understand how Haitian Americans are treated by African Americans once they immigrate. And so there's just layers of complexity that I think, unfortunately, are a little bit beyond his pay grade, and also even the average viewer. This is one of the reasons why I said to you, Moise, I wish we could have done a talk back right there, because I know there are people in that audience, so they have a way of responding to the interracial tensions in it, but they don't have a way of responding to your internal tensions. And that's, some of that to me is about the playwright and the dances that like New York playwrights do with New York critics, right? They kind of elide certain things because they're trying to appeal to the Brantleys of the world. But his character is a complex character, and those layers, I think, are going to be lost on some people.
Right. And that makes me want to support what James was saying earlier about the importance of conversation.
Yep.
I mean, it is important for us to learn to talk. We, at Middle Church, we started an anti-racist task force last year. We've always been a multiracial church since 35 years, 40 years, but we were like, I'm like, that's not enough. What we have to be is anti-racist, and what does that look like? And so we put some white people together with some black people and some Latino people and some Asian people and made them read and talk about race all year long, a whole year living together. James Baldwin, like Ta-Nehisi Coates, like Michelle, like we watched 13th, like really get into it. But also to James's point, so learning is important. But also to James's point, the systemic issues are at play. So all of my friends that are in the theater, Middle's very artsy, all my friends that are in the theater understand that New York doesn't have much taste for black art, black artists. We don't have the power, we don't have the money, we have a long way to go as we dismantle racism and racist systems in terms of just what gets played, what gets aired, what gets funded. All of that is at work as well.
I'm glad. I was going to say anew now. In your case, coming from an immigrant background, as James was talking about, and I'm wondering whether there have been biases that you felt by, hey, black folks. Whether there's like cross-cultural ickiness going on with that. But just jump in with whatever you're going to say.
I think, well, first of all, a plug for Middle. I've been a member of Middle Church for over 7 years. And it's one of the reasons why I do the work that I do, because it's such an inspirational, beautiful space. And even though it's rooted in the Christian tradition, it's very multi-faith. There's Muslim members, Jewish members, Buddhist members, you name it.
It's very strange.
And atheists, which is why it's called Love, period. With that said, I think there's several things that you all have mentioned, particularly around this idea of structural racism and this idea of systemic power. And then what you said around this particular reviewer and how much power or influence and following this person has. So this is where it's really important to really think about, yes, we all have internalized as well as externalized biases, but institutions and systems are made up of people. And we can't forget that. There are specific decision makers that make those decisions. And all of our institutions, including our churches, including this theater, has a board of directors, has senior management, has employees, and they are the ones that are making day-to-day decisions.
That's right.
And it's, again, what they associate as important, they think as priorities, and end up becoming institutional policies. That's right. They end up becoming institutional decisions. So now this particular reviewer, just because as a matter of example, he has his own ways of perceiving the world.
Absolutely.
He has his subjective judgments around what is art and what isn't art, which has been colored by his own lived experience as well as his education, his pedigree, and what's right, what's wrong.
Or not colored.
Or not colored.
So to speak.
Or not
So to
colored.
speak.
Yes, we are at the National Black Theater.
Yeah,
Or not colored,
yo.
right? With that said though, right, this is where breaking bias amongst someone like him is so important. Now, he may have a paid position, in academia, it's tenured roles. So once you're tenured, you're there for the rest of your life. So it's hard to, replace that position. So it's like, well, we need to be able to hold these individuals accountable. And then also shift these shared understandings they have, these shared biases they have around culture, right? This is happening in our schools. Teachers share a certain set of understanding around Black children. So for me, this was really, I went to law school at NYU, and as a 1L, I basically became part of this thing called Suspension Representation Project. So I went to public schools in New York City all my life, and
Hey, me too. Yo, holla!
And as 6 and 7-year-olds, basically they were being assigned an advocate to speak on their behalf so we can defend them from getting suspended from school. Now,
Black folks are exponentially.
Yeah.
These
It's
were
unbelievable.
little 6, 7, 8-year-old Black children in neighborhoods like Canarsie, in neighborhoods like Flatbush. And law students, most of us are from very privileged backgrounds, are going to represent them because they need help. But what's going on in the psyche of this little child?
Right, exactly.
Right? The infraction that my child, that was representing was, called in for was she flipped a table. She's 6 years old. She is 6 years old. What are the teachers thinking about her? So when our children, particularly in poor communities, of color or not, are using certain vernacular that we're criminalizing, that's just what they've heard. That's what they've
That's
learned.
what they've seen.
That's how they speak English.
Yeah.
Right? So we shouldn't criminalize that, but that type of compassion, that type of understanding is lacking amongst our decision makers.
Yeah.
And this is the action that I feel we need to take.
Right.
Well, I've got to jump in and say that I don't mean to interrupt, but 40 plus years ago, I don't have to go into the details of my own age, but my mother was a paraprofessional in junior high school, in my junior high school in Queens, and she found out that as young as elementary schools, there were very interesting little tracking things done. And there actually were children that were categorized all those years ago as pre-offenders.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, we have a feeling this kid is going to get in trouble down the line. I mean,
No, it's 2017 as well. This hasn't changed.
And they're still building prisons based on school district scores in the Bronx and all over the country. Just to kind of dive in on the back end of what Anna was saying there, I think there are lots of different things that we can do, must do, to shine the light on racism, bias, white supremacy. I think conversation is really important. I think confronting each other is really important.
and that's everybody we're talking about.
I mean, everybody, right? Because the thing that can happen, I'm a psychologist type person, and the thing that can happen is that we can be so traumatized by not only the things we've experienced in terms of racial prejudice, but also the things we watch. That's what makes it. So you watch your 6-year-old colleague get snatched. How many of us are not traumatized by the picture of that little girl in handcuffs? How many of us were not traumatized by that little girl, that teenager in the yellow bikini? Right? I say it and it comes right back to you.
Yeah.
So just imagine the little kids in the schoolyard who don't have the defenses and the grown-upness that most of us have, right? So they're traumatized by the thing that happens to their colleague, then they're angry, then they don't have defenses, then they don't have coping skills, and then they want to kick the SHIT out of somebody, and then they do, and then they flip a table, and then they're criminalized, and then all the kids are watching them be dragged out, and then they're traumatized. Then you have a whole generation of traumatized young people who do not have the capacity to do anything different. And then we are adults. So let's think about us. So I'm called the N-word at 5, and that's not the only experience I've had, but I watched my neighbor get the crap kicked out of him. And I said to my dad, what happened? I'm 8. Parking tickets. Parking tickets. So that's inside. All of us have that stuff inside, and what we can do in this climate, I'm going to quickly say this, is get so deeply wounded that we pull way away from each other, and then there's no healing.
Right.
Then there's no conversation. And then we've got black folks over here, white folks over here, the poor people, all the poor people are just poor, but they're not going to get together and kick Trump's butt because he got us fighting with each other. Right? The Muslims over here and the Latinos over here. I'm saying we've got to also find ways to pull together around the things that we have in common.
So, Moise, I was actually going to go to you because one of the things that I think does pull people together or can pull people together again is art and music and theater. You do rap, you sing, you know, there's lots of different opinions far and wide about the influence of music, of whether rap is a unifying force, whether using the N-word is an empowering thing or something that keeps us in a self-hate mode. I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, my brother. But where do you see art bringing people together, or do you see that?
Well, it depends on who the artist is.
Okay,
right?
like I'm talking about you.
Right. Oh, what I do is I just try to give the truth. A lot of times, you spoke about Fox News, you know, but unfortunately, in my experiences, they've labeled me as, you know, they've depicted me as a criminal, even in instances where I was doing a hero act.
Oh,
so it's
would you like to explain to people
more?
what happened?
Well, I oftentimes try to step in when I see something wrong happening, right? You know, there's been multiple instances. You know, this is New York City. We experience a lot of craziness. And unfortunately, there are some people who do not want to step in and see people thrive. So there's been instances where I've seen women being sexually assaulted just the other day after a show of mine.
Well, this is the famous one. I'm just showing people what happened in October.
Yeah, that makes me uncomfortable.
Come on, but fill people in case they don't know.
But I just saw this guy groping a young girl and stuff like that, and it just, I stepped in. I told him, if you do it again, you know, we're gonna have a problem. And he called me a nigger and stuff like that. So that was a big no-no for me. So I tried to distance myself from that situation. But then he threatened to kill me. So where I'm from, we don't play with threats like that. So what I did was, I did what I did by any means necessary to stop him from doing that. Beat him up, broke his nose, sent him to the hospital, and he went to jail, and all of that good stuff. But I want to go back to what I was saying. Thank you for that plug.
You're welcome. You deserve
Follow me
it.
on Instagram, @MoiseMorancy. Just kidding.
No, you're not.
No, I'm not.
That's right.
But the thing is, you know, it's what you bring to it, who the artist is, right? So I went back to that point about Fox. They would always try to depict me as a thug or a criminal or whatever the case is. They would say I make gangster rap music. I don't make gangster rap music. I make audacious music. You know, basically, I try to tell my reality and what I seen. My unfortunate reality is I grew up in the hood in Brooklyn. So I grew up and I currently live around drug dealers, probably shaking hands with murderers, shaking hands with prostitutes. This is an unfortunate reality. I'm not proud to say, but I'm not ashamed of it as well. So I say all of that to say, I talk about what I know. And that's not the only thing I know. I'm college educated and stuff like that. But I wanted to piggyback on what you were saying regarding love and bringing people together. My music isn't necessarily to bring people together, it's to give you the truth.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about bringing people together, we have to question who is separating us. And it's not black people who are really trying to separate each other. We are the result of the slavery. We are the result of being divide and conquer from white supremacists and stuff like that. My real perspective on it, and it's going to make people uncomfortable, but I don't really care, is what I really want to say is that, hold on one second, let me say this right. Let me say this right. I'm not here to be your friend. The reality is that the kids in my neighborhood are walking around every day and coming to me and telling me that cops are pulling guns on them.
That's right.
Who's dealing with that? And the first thing they're gonna tell me and ask me is, what did the kid do? A 12-year-old kid, what did the kid do? You're a grown-ass man and you got a gun on a kid. It don't make no sense to me. I'm not here to be your friend. Let's respect each other for our differences And that's it. We're not the same. We are black people here, and you too, brother. I'm not the same as you.
Of course not. Right.
You know, we just need to be respected for our differences. Yeah. You're a little bit older than me, probably like 5 years older than me or something like that, but...
More than that.
Okay. But we need to be respected for our differences. I'm here to tell you the truth. Black people, we're in this predicament because of racist white people. And of course we know that not all white people are racist. I'd be a liar if I said that. I didn't have white people in my corner who truly, genuinely cared about me. I didn't have white people who were like aunts and uncles to me and basically helped raise me to be the man that I am today. But we have to understand that white people as a collective over the last 400 years never really tried to help black people. We're not on their agenda. So what we need to do is stop being so damn inclusive. I'm not a separatist, you know, that's not my ideology. I love all people. I'm nice with people who are nice with me. But if somebody's doing something wrong, I'm not gonna be your friend. I'm not gonna shake your hand, and I'm gonna use an extreme example. A couple of years ago when I was 18, I was going to Kingsborough Community College where I used to go. And it's mainly Russians and just a lot of white folks who live there. This white guy came and he spit near my foot and called me a nigger. Now this is an emotional 18-year-old boy, right? Right. So the first thing I thought to myself, I said, if I break this man's nose, I'm gonna go to jail. But if I break this man's nose, he'll think twice about doing that again. Right. Now, if I were to say, you know what, listen here, sir, please do not look at me like that. I'm a man. I love you. Do you think he'll be fearful and he'll want to do that again? Come on, man. We got to start being real with ourselves. The only reason why black people are in this predicament today is because of fear and violence. That's the only reason why. Love is not going to get us out. We cannot love our oppressors to getting us at the top. If anybody has a problem with me, you know, they're going to look at me now, they say, wow, he's a distinguished young man, okay? But if you saw me in the street when I'm wearing my hoodie and my do-rag, you'd be fearful of me. You'd think twice about stepping to me. I want that fear. Not because I want to be tough and have that animosity, but I don't want to be hurt. I will protect my family and myself by any means necessary. So this whole notion of love is bullshit. We need to stop doing that as black people.
Okay, hold on one second before anybody talks.
My bad,
and
I
then
apologize.
No,
I love it.
Anu caught my eye first, and then it's going to be James. But I want to say I have to do a little housekeeping. We're going to have time to answer questions, and you probably got cards passed out earlier, so make sure you jot those questions down. If you want to ask a particular person, write that down. We'll collect them at the end. And now back to Anu. Yes.
So I think I couldn't disagree anymore. But with that said, that's what we have opinions for in our views of the world. I think love is the only way that's going to take us out of this. You know, a few days before Dr. King was assassinated, he literally told on national television to one of his confidants, Harry Belafonte, that this whole integration business was great, but I didn't know that we were integrating into a burning house. So this house that we called our country, America, was never really a strong edifice.
It's literally on flames now.
Right,
it's really on fire.
Right. And because the deeper values that we espouse around life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness made for all human beings weren't secured for human beings with chemicals in their skin called melanin, which is why I'm brown and other people are darker brown. So these are the little things that we don't know. Now going back to what you said, right, around people degrading you, dehumanizing you to your face with respect to calling you all sorts of slurs, that's really to pull you down, push you down. This is why I could be a lawyer just practicing in the world, but I was like, no, we need to break bias, we need to hack bias. And it really moved me to do that, because to me, what that feels like is cruelty. I was working in New Orleans for a summer, watching 16, 15-year-old black kids going to prison for 3, 4, 5 years at a time for breaking cell phones, for trespassing private property. It's ridiculous, it's disgusting. And I have worked in some of the most autocratic countries in the world, including North Korea. And the feeling I got in my gut when I saw children going to prison for that long was appalling. And this country is a sham, but it's still my country. And this is where I believe I'm listening to Reverend Jackie Lewis every week, because this is about love, period. Because what are the forces that create that kind of cruelty in the other people? And how are we giving up our power when people are using dehumanizing words towards us? We believe them. This is internalized bias. This is internalized racism. So when someone calls me Osama bin Laden, am I believing him? Am I giving away my power to this person? I'm not Osama, I'm Anurag. I'm a lawyer. Okay, you're a deluded self. Great. Back at you. But I know who I am, and I love myself for who I am. And this is what we need. This is how we heal post-traumatic slave disorder. This is how we heal trauma in our communities. When we stop believing all the bullshit. And then it's just dogs barking. And we're like, okay, we'll pet you, all right. Right, and this is what it is. This is an illness of the mind.
So I just have to say, and James, James is next.
And then I'm going to come.
And then it's going to be Jack. And then Moise, we're going to go back to you. Just getting on what Anu said about being able to take that and sort of do a, I don't know, almost like, yeah, there's some kind of Asian art. What would that be?
Martial arts.
Yes.
Kung Fu.
Not Kung Fu.
Jiu-Jitsu is when you rearrange the energy.
Not Tai Chi. Yes,
Tai Chi.
it's almost a Tai Chi. Take the negative energy, put it out as positive energy. So do you think, this may not be part of your what you were going to say, but I got to ask you, for some black folks, I'm jumping on this, but for some black folks, is that why taking a word like nigger and thinking or feeling like that can be repurposed and strengthened or something, is that a kind of empowering thing? It doesn't work for me. It has never worked for me. Every time I hear it, it's like a knife to my heart. I can't quite take that and flip it back and go, my nigga. I Nancy, personally can't, but among other, like, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to get to Moist X's comments in a minute, but
Okay.
let's just take the N-word
I hope you
piece.
don't mind me throwing that.
No.
Yeah.
Let's take the N-word piece.
Because I think that's, I mean, we're a group. Go on.
The rules for the N-word to me are very, very simple. Okay, they're very, very simple. If you're a white person, never use the N-word.
Never.
And why would you want to?
Well,
we know
never use the
why,
N-word.
but yeah.
When you sing along with a song, whatever you think, just never use the
Never.
N-word, right? The second rule is this. If you're in your own speech community, if you're talking amongst your friends, people you grew up with, I do understand, because black folks' use of speech and of vernacular is the most innovative and the most culturally potent and creative use of language all over the world. I mean, people speak like black people all over the world. People follow our vernacular and are influenced by our lexicon all over this world. For decades, it's been that way. So the power of black language is powerful enough to transform or adjust the meaning of the N-word in specific speech communities. But once you put it on a record, or once it gets out into the public sphere, you cannot divorce the term from the awful history out of which it emerges, right? So that, and by that logic, you know, you go listen to a Richard Pryor record.
Oh my goodness.
Right? Go listen to the Last Poets. Listen to folks who used the N-word before rappers did, because once rappers started using it, people tried to forget the creativity and the innovation with which black artistry has deployed the N-word before. You cannot discount the possibility that by repurposing the N-word within certain speech communities, it has emptied the word of some of its negativity and some of its racist meaning. But again, you put it on record, it gets out in public, you can't divorce it from its history. It is what it is. So even rappers who will say it on records, by the way, anybody do this test, all right? Listen to 1,000 different rap records where they use the N-word and tally up the use of the N-word. Like, do a sociological study, quantify it. I guarantee you they're using it more negatively than they are positively. So it's not always just about some term of endearment. Okay. And by the way, the N-word takes different shape in different contexts. It's a very complicated term. But you can't divorce it from its history once it's in the public sphere.
That's
right. So white folks don't use it. It has a particular history once it's in the public. There are private speech communities that can use it and can transform its meaning, just because black speech and black language is one of the most powerful, most transformative forms of language, period. Right. But let me just speak to Moise's piece for 1 second.
Of course.
Because I love this brother. Right? I love what if you see him on stage, you'll understand that better, like what he sacrifices in that production. I can only imagine what he went through in the rehearsing and everything even to do it. But I also understand and validate his anger. Yeah. That's true. Right? I understand because I know where it comes from. It's where I come from. I'm more than 2 decades older than you. I thought it was 5. I'm more than 20 years older than you.
Well, you look great. And you know what they say. Black don't crack. Black don't crack, for those of you who don't know.
I'm a literary guy who's deeply invested in language, so I just want to clarify terms, because a lot of times people try to define love as like this hippie, happy-go-lucky, peaceful. That is not the sole way to define love. If you read Toni Morrison's Sula, I mean, a little spoiler alert here. Read Toni Morrison's Sula. You'll see the maternal character close to the end of the novel sets her son on fire. Right? She kills him by setting him on fire. Now, if you just were to read through that or see that, you might think, wow, that's awful, that's hateful. How could a mother set their son on fire? Well, what you need to know about Plum is he is consumed by his addiction. And at the point at which he sets him on fire, it's hard to understand it, but that's an act of love, right? So love is not always about something, it's not peace. Love is not peace, right? Love is not passivity. You know, we need to think about the ways in which James Baldwin talks about love. Right? The way that James Baldwin loved America and loved white America came across to some people as pure hate. But what he was doing was he was challenging this country and challenging white Americans to live by the principles of which they talk. Precisely. The principles by which they speak. Precisely. You know, sometimes love looks like you setting somebody on fire. It is not always something peaceful. So let's make sure we understand what love is. You can love someone and challenge them and confront them and force them to be the people they're supposed to be. You know, if we want to talk about humanity, right? Sometimes loving our humanity requires a certain kind of confrontation with that humanity.
Absolutely. Yes.
It is not always about peace or inclusivity. That can be part of it, but it is not always that.
Right. Right.
Can I jump right on in there?
Yes, and then Moise, I swear to God, you're going to be right.
He's coming back.
Yeah.
Moise is 22 years old, and he's a badass. He just is. So part of what I want to talk about is the way things like the N-word, the traumas of our lives, the real lived experiences of a 58-year-old woman versus a 46-year-old man versus a 22-year-old African-American man and a beautiful 40-something-year-old woman.
57. I'm right there with you, sis.
But I mean, it's different.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine about it. I'm fine about it. You are too.
It's different to have watched Selma unfold
Right.
in real time. It really is. It's different to have watched the snapping dogs in real time. And our young people know their history. So I'm not saying that. I'm also saying, though, it's different to have had that real lived experience. And what that shapes in each of us, James and me and Moise, what shapes in each of us is the stories that have happened to us. How did our parents break it down to us? When did we see it first? How were we traumatized? What was the healing work? What is the book we read? What are the movies we saw? What is the music we listened to? Those cultural, Erik Erikson says, culture shapes us and we shape culture. But we're always being read upon. Precisely. We're always being etched onto. All of that stuff is what's at work. So Moise's truth and my truth and James's truth might overlap, but they're not exactly the same.
Right.
So that's why we have to have lots of people on a panel, you know, because we teach each other. So I really am going to say what love is to me. A philosopher says love is the unconditional regard for the unique particularity of another. Now, if you Google that, I'll come up, because who can spell his name? Diogenes Allen. But it's the unconditional regard for the unique particularity of the other. So when James says, I love this brother, I don't think they know each other well. But the regard for Moise's experience, right? His truth, his reality, to regard that. And too many young black men in our culture don't have that. And that's why they're fucking furious, said the pastor. They're angry because they're not seen and received and it's not validated. Right? So unconditional regard for the unique particularity of the other, which is to say the black church has to regard queer people's particular experiences, which is to say men have to regard women's particular experiences, which is to say Latinos are not black and they're not all Puerto Rican. Right? So we have to have a regard for the particularity of those people. That's what the human project is. And then love means I see you. It's African, it's Zulu. I see you, and therefore you exist. Salbona, I see you, I know you, I get to know you, I regard you, even if I disagree with you. Love is confrontation. Sometimes love kicks a little ass. It's not always patient and kind, thank you, Paul, from Corinthians. Love says, I want it to be better. Therefore, I have to be honest with you. And then love also says, to do Alice Walker, sometimes I don't want to be with you. Because I need to go by my own self, be my own little caucus, my own little black people, and have a nice day. And I don't want you to come to the party.
Indeed.
But sometimes I do want you to come to the party and really talk. So love is like that. And that's the kind of love I mean will heal us. It's not for wimps.
Okay, Moise.
I don't think love is for wimps. I think love is essential.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got a little crazy earlier.
No,
but it's coming back. Don't get crazy. No, but my thing is this. I used that methodology before. When we talk about love, we have to also talk about forgiveness.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
But if a sick man rapes a woman once, and she forgives him, okay. That's her. She needed that for herself. She needed that to strengthen herself and not have hatred, because it's really poisonous. I know, trust me. But if the man keeps raping that woman, is it really a mistake, or is it a choice?
Yeah, and she doesn't have to forgive that.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, America has raped and done the most disgusting things that it has ever done to black people.
Yep.
The worst things imaginable.
Yep.
Now, if it did it once, I wouldn't forgive you, but let's just say I forgive you. Been doing it every single day over the last 400 years. I will never love my enemy. And this is not just some emotional response for some angry young black man, 22-year-old. No. I understand you guys are older than me. I understand what you're saying, and I agree to an extent, but I'm no fool. I've had police officers tell me he wished he could kill me. So I'm going to sit there and love that police officer? I'm no fool. Come on, man. How did black people get in this predicament today? They use divide and conquer tactics. Let's say Crips and Bloods, say they spoke different languages. They came to Africa, they said, you know what? This tribe doesn't agree with this tribe. I'm gonna plant some seeds here. You guys go against each other, and I'm gonna take all of you and do the worst things imaginable. Here we are, 400 years, and I'm gonna sit here and talk about love. Now, a lot of people told me before coming to this panel, Moise, watch what you say.
A lot of people. I made a slight, not because of anything you said.
No, I'm just saying, like, you know, my mom is right there, so she probably gonna get with my ass after, but.
No.
She said,
where's mom at?
Watch what you say, because you wanna move up the social stratosphere. You wanna be a very popular and very successful actor. You wanna be a very successful rapper, whatever, what have you. And we know that white people are on top. Now, you see my anger, it's justifiable anger.
Of course it is. Yep.
But I'm no fool. Does that mean I hate all white people? Absolutely not. If Fox is watching this, they're gonna label me as a hate monger again. But I don't hate all white people. I have white people in my life who are like parents to me.
Right.
Who helped raise me become the man that I am today. But I'm no fool. The white masses don't care about us. I'm not gonna hit you with love. When I go out in the streets, I'm very nice to everybody. White or black, whatever the case is. But if you show violence towards me, I'm gonna show violence to you tenfold, so you'll never do it again. This is what black people need to do. We need to stop being so inclusive. We need to stop being brainwashed, because this whole notion of love is fabricated. It doesn't exist. Really, hold on, let me just finish. Let me just finish now, that's cool. When have white people ever really loved us? Hold on, this is a real question. When have white people as a whole really loved us black people?
White people as a whole don't love us black people.
Okay.
I'm going to join you right there.
All right.
White people as a whole don't love us black people. But those two white parents, the two people that were like parents to you, are like two people.
Right.
And then there's like that one over there, that's another person.
They're not the majority.
And then there's, you're absolutely right, love. I'm not fighting with you. I'm actually joining with you. And I'm also saying that one at a time, two at a time, 3 or 4 at a time, somewhere, this is Ruby Sales. Let me be an old black lady, Ruby Sales for a second. Ruby Sales, beautiful talk. You know her from SNCC?
No, I'm familiar with that.
Ruby was the youngest person from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So she was 16 when they walked across Selma. And she's now 70-something, and she's doing a lot of speaking. We were in Charlottesville together, Moise, a couple weeks ago. She has this really beautiful talk on Krista Tippett's show where she talks about where does it hurt. So this is what Ruby's saying. She's saying white people no longer, and she ain't trying to do white masses either. I'm not either. She says white people don't want to be coddled by us. They don't need to be coddled by us. White people need to be confronted by us. They need to be reminded of their humanity, she says. They need to be reminded of what their potential is so they can live into it. And she's not trying to give no money to some white structure. She's not trying to like be we shall overcome, singing kumbaya all the time. But she is saying the way to heal the thing is to remind people of their potential. And that's just a strategy. If I were, like, if Moise and I were kicking it, which I hope we will be, I would want him to come to my church and do his rap. Yes, in the sanctuary. Come on now. Okay. And, but we need more than one strategy.
Absolutely.
And I think that he's right, that we can't include haters. We can't include the violent. We can't include white people trying to cripple us.
Racist white people.
Racist white people.
Clarify.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Racist white people they're not ready. I heard a white woman the other day say, I'm not white anymore, I'm woke. I was like, oh, no, you're still white and you're waking up.
Right.
We have to have strategies. Some of them I think is separate sometimes, I really do. And some of it I think is, I need to tell you that that's some crap. That's the truth. And some of it is 3-4 people come sit with us and be with us. And some of it is grow a movement across the country that is Muslim, Christian, Jewish, all of that. Was that too long?
No.
I agree. I basically agree with everybody. I'm so sorry for that.
That's all right. What I was going to say, because I feel you, and I'm not trying to dissipate or shake any of your righteous indignation or anything. I'm just wondering, as a group here, and there might be people who are going to have questions about this, like, how do we work with that?
Yeah.
How do we, I mean, so that you don't get arrested, let's say, and we lose you in the prison industrial complex. You talk about if somebody confronts you, you're going to confront them back, which I understand. Let me speak. So there's that. Like, how can we channel those feelings in a way that's positive, where we don't lose you, where we don't lose people that are standing up for what they believe in what is a violent society? At the same time, I'm wondering, in these conversations, like, isn't it exhausting as a person of color, sometimes this responsibility to sort of have to, be the ambassador of goodness to, like, white America, to try to train them? I mean, that's like a heavy burden. James, I'm going to let you, haven't spoken in a while. I'm going to throw, and then Anu, you too. Oh, and I see that we have to sort of wrap it up, our part. Oh, shoot. Okay, well, man, James, you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that everybody has to be some kind of ambassador for race relations, and not a lot of people are really built for that. That's a lot of work.
Right.
Actually, and, again, I don't think I'm also, just to be clear, like, for me, as somebody who has covered a lot of, like, institutional racism and had to actually cover a lot of the Black death that we've seen come across our screens over the last several years, it takes an extraordinary toll. But the anger that I might feel about, like, cops or, like, structural systems, the reason why at 46 I'm not internalizing holding that, because it kills people. I've seen it kill people, man. I'm not talking about a cop killing you. I'm talking about the internalization of the hatred killing people. Look at the data. Don't take my word for it. Please, there's great research coming out about this now, about how institutional racism and racism kills Black people, right?
And it's passed on to our children with the Melissa Harris.
Epigenetics, cortisol in the body.
Yeah, so we have to, I have to make some choices about what it is I'm going to do. So part of also what I'm talking about, love, is talking about, like, focusing on my community and on my family. I'm not necessarily talking about, like, building bridges, right? Because there are some people who do that, and that's great. And that's important. But you do have to make decisions. This is not just for you, Moise, this is for everybody. You have to make decisions about how you process the world that we live in. Yeah. You know what I mean? And for black people and for women, the stakes are extremely high.
Yeah.
Right? The mortality of black women is extraordinary. Yeah. And again, don't take my word for it. Just look at the data. Look at life expectancy. Look at the stress on people's hearts. Look at why and how they're dying.
Right.
So you can have the righteous anger, brother. You know what I'm saying? But I'm 46. You see what I'm saying? And I would like to see my children's children.
Right.
Right. And so you have to make choices. And yes, I believe we can change the world, but it ain't gonna happen in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. And so I cannot internalize every piece of racism. You know how many times you're gonna watch the Eric Garner video, right? You know what I mean? How many times you're gonna watch the Walter Scott video? Or how many times are you going to watch these cats get off after they commit murder? Right. You know, and again, I'm in the media, I have to cover it, but I have to be very careful about that. And so I validate the anger and the energy. We need it. We need young people to have it. But people also need to understand there's mortal consequences to the amount of white supremacy and racism and institutional racism that we actually consume.
Mm-hmm. In our own bodies, which is what you were saying.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, we're about to end, but I'll just say that skillful means are so important.
What does that mean?
Well, skillful basically is what is most skillful given the realities of the world we live in, right? We've tried to fight the system, we've tried to burn it down many, many times, but look at where it is now. You know, the most progressive civil rights legislation was passed in 1965, but with respect to wealth, with respect to health disparity, with respect to criminal justice disparities, we're exactly where we were in 1965, if not worse, when it comes to African Americans. So where has that gotten us? I agree with you, where the diversity and inclusion conversation gotten us, but it's because we have failed to change hearts and minds.
Oh my goodness.
And going back to what the professor was saying here, our bodies, regardless of what color it is, operates the same exact way. It's a human organism. Fight, flight, freeze. That's the nervous system. And black bodies and brown bodies in our country are deeply, deeply heightened. The nervous system is super heightened. So we need to do our healing. And this is one of if there's one takeaway, if you are from a black community or brown community, self-love is revolutionary. That's what R.D. Lord said.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And self-preservation. So when I hear you speak, regardless of the fighting talk and all that, what I hear beneath that is that you want to create some boundaries because you don't want the stress of that because your nervous system can't handle it. Yes, do that. Please. Yeah. We need you to do that.
Yeah.
It's harder to do it as an artist.
It is. I was going to say, we talked a little bit about that, but create, if you'll pardon my French, create the fuck around it, write and act. And I know you're pouring it into your role, and that is a gift where you can put a lot of that. Right. So anyway, we have to just kind of pause right here because we do have questions from the audience, unless we've totally blown through all of the time. No! We're totally out of time, totally? Oh, man.
Oh, my God. Okay.
That was crazy.
That was crazy.
Can we just have closing arguments, like one sentence each?
Yeah, that's a great sentence. That's a great. Yeah, listen. First, I want to. Before we get the one. No, let's everybody one line on tonight. What your takeaway is. I like that. The takeaway. Professor Peterson.
Yeah, sorry we were so long-winded that we weren't inclusive of the audience. So I apologize for that. But I just want to use my time to give it up for Nisi, who did so much. It's hard to pull out a bunch of folks for a program, so Nisi, shout out to you.
Oh.
Okay. Is that not good?
No, that's fine. It's your.
Okay. I think I would say I want to shout out to this panel. I love being in the room with people talking about this stuff. It's just, thank you for your moderation. I think that probably somewhere you can find us on social media. There's a lot of people talking about revolutionary love. I'd love for you to think about the particular ways we're talking about it. Love God, love neighbor, love self, or love opponent, love neighbor, love self, if you don't believe in deities. But I'm really impressed with the articulate young people coming behind us, kicking tail. That's what I want to say.
All right.
I probably ruined all my chances to be in a movie with Denzel.
I don't think so.
Not at all.
Turn that camera off. I didn't plan it to go like this. I thought I was going to be able to suppress it, but it got real. And it was necessary.
That's what's supposed to happen.
And I'm very grateful for this experience to be among such intellectual individual and genuine people. And I think the best thing that I can say right now, you know, is love those who love you. That's the most logical thing to do. It's foolish to love those who hate us. I wouldn't ask a woman who's been raped to love her rapist. You know, so that's all I can say. I love everybody here. I don't hate all white people, no matter what you think. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bruce.
It was so fun to be here. I am actually a bridge builder, so I really care about everybody out there. So if you know the people at New York Times, if you know someone in your community, you know, at your organizations, in businesses that need some hacking racial bias, please call me. We're at bemoreamerica.org. Our goal is to really unleash human potential by eradicating bias. I really think it's an algorithm of the mind. It's programming that can be hacked, but it needs to be done in a skillful way, using science as our supporter. With that said, you know, what you shared today is actually really powerful, and that's what we need more validation around. So if any of us have anger, please take it out, but like in a skillful way, as long as it's non-harming other people. But suppressing it goes back to what you were saying, Doctor.
Cancer.
Right,
Cancer.
right.
And I will share one quick story. John Thompson is one of the reasons why I got into this work. John Thompson started Riot in New Orleans, resurrection after exoneration. He was wrongfully convicted of a crime he never committed, spent 20 years on death row, and was released. His case went up to the Supreme Court, who denied him compensation of $20 million. There's a New York Times, editorial obituary on him, inspirational person. He died 2 months ago. He was 54. Heart attack. So this stuff kills. So the stress that we have in our bodies, we do need to release it. Dance, act, sing. India Ari is on my jam every time. Do it, but we need to do that. It is our self-preservation. I love you all.
I just want to end by saying there's so much, obviously so much to be said, and so much I would love to also say, but first I want to apologize to those of you who wrote questions. Please accept my deep apologies. I was as involved in this conversation as everyone else. I failed you as your moderator, but I will work something out. Some of us, I know that Professor Peterson has to go, but some of us who don't have to rush away, maybe you can, bring your questions or thoughts to us. But I am absolutely humbled by all of you. I am not an atheist, but I'm definitely agnostic, but I love the stuff that you're saying, and it's going to make me maybe check out your church, because they say that 11 o'clock Sundays is the most segregated hour in this country, and the idea, the idea of at least getting different types of people together under what is supposed to be something spiritual, when I see so many instances of quote-unquote Christianity and spirituality like used in the most disgusting ways, I'm very encouraged by that. I want to thank this incredible panel. Anu Gupta, you can start applauding and just keep it going. Anu Gupta, Moise Morency, Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis, Professor James Braxton Peterson. Thanks to the new group. I'm Nancy Giles. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This was magnificent.
Can we put their questions on your website in any kind of way? Can we have an ongoing conversation at the website? I just thought I'd say that. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Don't be scared of me. Don't be scared of me.
I love what you said so much.